You cannot give proof that the virus exists. You better start giving me the proof.
People have sent me all sorts of very nasty messages about this.
I know that they exist. I've seen them. So when people say that they're not real, I don't know where this is coming from.
I mean, we have so many different things we can do to show that, yes, viruses are real things. And yes, they can make us sick.
Disagreements are part of life. You might even say they're a sign of a healthy society, when we can vote for different political parties and hold different opinions about the best ways to solve a problem, or just how to live our lives. But what about when the line between opinion and fact gets blurred?
I've called them kind of the flat earthers of biology, because similar to flat earth, we can, show pictures of the earth being round and people will still deny it.
You're listening to Trending, and I'm Rachel Schreier, the BBC's health and disinformation reporter. In our Extreme series, we're exploring the ways social media is shaping behaviour and beliefs on the fringes of the internet. I've been investigating a small but growing community of people who have taken rejecting mainstream medicine to the extreme. In South Africa, they are awakening memories of a painful chapter in the country's recent history.
Hi, I'm Dr. Wilson. I'm a PhD molecular biologist.
Dan Wilson is a biologist who works in his day job developing treatments for disease. But in his spare time, he runs a popular YouTube channel called Debunk the Funk, where he tackles health misinformation. Along with other more common beliefs, he's seen something arguably stranger spiral in recent years.
The first time I encountered germ theory denial online was, I want to say, 8 or 10 years ago.
Back then, it was something he stumbled on once in a blue moon. But since, he's seen a rise in the numbers of people online saying they don't believe in germs.
With germ theory, we have tons and tons of evidence over hundreds of years that there are these things called microbes, and they can make us sick.
Germ theory. That's the basic understanding that some illnesses are caused by tiny things called microbes, or germs, invading a human or animal's body. That includes viruses, bacteria, and fungi. Scientists can look at germs under microscopes.
We can take the virus and take it and infect animals with it, make it sick. And we can also find that same genetic sequence in humans and track it through a population and observe a wave of illness.
It's about as well proven as anything in science ever can be. But events of recent years seem to have pushed some people from mistrusting authorities to doubting more and more aspects of our shared reality. It's one thing if your neighbour Jeff thinks people should never eat ice cream, and you think it's okay to eat ice cream every now and then. But if you think people can eat ice cream, and Jeff thinks ice cream doesn't exist, the whole thing becomes harder to discuss.
I think there has been an uptick in these beliefs during the pandemic.
The largest online group dedicated to germ denial that I've investigated boasts over 30,000 members on Facebook, though there are several other smaller groups. Its admin, Lauren, who runs the group, tells me that it grew from around 150 members in 2019.
There are people who think that viruses don't exist at all, and thus they don't cause disease. There are people who think that viruses exist, but they are just the byproduct of dying cells and they're not the cause of the disease. And there are people who think the same of bacteria, too.
Lauren believes germs exist, but are harmless, and the symptoms of disease are caused by the body being poisoned, particularly by what people eat and drink. She advocates for a restrictive diet, mostly based on fruit and raw vegetables, which could leave people at risk of serious nutrient deficiencies. Her group swarms with advice to avoid medicines and vaccines. Meat, dairy, and even fruit juices are toxic, according to them. Doctors are not your friend, whether you have a baby with a fever or a father with cancer. The conversation hardly existed before 2020 and grew with the start of the COVID pandemic. But it didn't stop there. It kept growing, with higher numbers in 2023 than we saw at the height of the pandemic. It was the pandemic that led Veronica to start questioning. She spent it in her seaside home near Cape Town in South Africa. She began reading deep online and in obscure books. I found her in a 1,000-strong Telegram group devoted to questioning mainstream medical advice, and she agreed to speak to me.
I've been interested in alternative health for many, many years. And then, of course, what happened with the coronavirus really just sparked another level of my interest. And it was through that I decided to look more closely into the whole germ versus terrain theories.
Terrain theory. She'd stumbled on a virtually forgotten and disproven 19th century theory. More than 150 years ago, two scientists were competing to prove what caused illness.
At the beginning of the century, everyone was adamant that disease caused germs. But a forward-thinking Frenchman by the name of Dr. Louis Pasteur believed it was, in fact, the other way round, that germs caused disease. Pasteur was
At the same time, another French scientist called Antoine Béchamp was putting forward a different idea. It was called terrain theory and claimed germs were harmless things which only mutated into something disease-causing inside an unhealthy body. Béchamp's theory fell away as more and more evidence mounted for germ theory. Now, certain groups online have seized on this outdated idea.
I think it does generally fit with the wellness idea. It doesn't have to go all the way to germ theory denial, but just the idea that you can take supplements or eat a certain way or live a certain lifestyle and not have to worry about disease.
It's one thing to say that general good health will make you better able to fight off germs. Few doctors would disagree with that. But people like Veronica go much further.
I think the whole idea of infectious diseases that you can catch from someone else is an absolute myth that's been perpetuated for many, many decades on humanity, if not centuries.
Of course, not all diseases are caused by germs. They can be caused by genetics, lifestyle, and our environment. But Veronica believes all disease is caused by something toxic entering our bodies, though not germs. Pollution, or maybe electromagnetic frequencies, even though she does accept she doesn't have specific evidence for this.
I'm not a scientist, so at that level, I haven't got into that. When I say foreign particles, I mean things like chemicals, including pharmaceuticals, anything that's foreign to the human body, if that makes sense. Oh, and it could, of course, also be the incorrect diet. Cooked food, for example, foreign to the human body. We are the only species that eats cooked food. We are the only species whose health is really in trouble. You don't see lines of zebras and lions outside their own little pharmaceutical stores in the bush. You don't see them consulting their doctors. Oh, my word, I'm so sick. I've got this illness or that disease.
I think we've all had the experience in our life of, you go into work and there's someone sitting next to you coughing and sneezing, and 2 days later you start getting sick, and then 2 days later your kid gets sick. What do you think is happening there?
So again, we have to look at environment. What are you putting in your body at that time that you're not normally putting in? People generally tend to eat worse in winter. They're eating more cooked foods, they're eating heavier foods.
She made YouTube videos spreading the word, but they got taken down. Now she's training to be a naturopath, someone who offers alternative health advice and treatment.
I would absolutely tell all of my clients, your health is in your hands, not in your doctor's hands.
This is where germ denial comes home to roost. The belief goes hand in hand with a refusal of medicines and vaccines.
The germ theory, denial, and anti-vaccine crowds definitely have a lot of overlap. The germ theory denier circle exists within the anti-vaccine circle. So not everyone who's anti-vaccine denies germ theory, but I would say all germ theory deniers deny vaccines by necessity.
For some, anti-vaccine beliefs appear to have provided a gateway to denying germs. In South Africa, where Veronica lives, a small overlapping group of influencers has illustrated this link, and some have edged towards something with a more troubling history. Roberto Pereira was working as an HIV researcher in Johannesburg during the COVID pandemic. He watched as certain familiar faces were rolled out on the nightly news.
So at first it was that, COVID wasn't even a major issue at all, and then the goalposts move and then it was that people were being misdiagnosed, and then the posts get moved even further. I saw a couple of months ago they were hosting an actual AIDS denialist.
One man who built a large online following by questioning everything about the COVID pandemic is Professor Tim Noakes. When the COVID pandemic hit, Professor Noakes began to question the wisdom of lockdowns in his home country of South Africa. Then he questioned whether it was even a pandemic. In the last year, though, he began posting online and speaking on podcasts, taking this even further. And by the time we spoke, it became clear he discovered the work of a very specific set of influencers online.
And one of the presentations that I happened to come across was, do viruses exist? And so I watched it. And I'm not going to commit either way. I would like to see people come forward with evidence that they have isolated a virus.
I asked Noakes about the huge range of different types of evidence. Evidence that's been enough to satisfy thousands of other scientists worldwide who are experts in this field. The fact we can see viruses under a microscope, we can watch them kill cells in a petri dish.
You see, it's built on the idea that because the virus is present, because it killed the cells, there's a virus present. But they've never proved that, you see, that's the problem.
So what do you think it might, what are the hypotheses of what it could be?
Oh, it's part of the cells. If you break down cells, they form these little cellular structures which look just like a virus.
Even if they have a distinct kind of genetic fingerprint, which looks nothing like the human cell's genetic fingerprint.
I mean, again, now I'm talking outside my area of expertise.
People like Tim Noakes say they are just asking questions. They're not saying viruses don't exist, they just want proof. The problem comes when the people who are just asking questions refuse to accept any high-quality evidence that answers them. Like many germ deniers online, he's not convinced by the large body of evidence for viruses. He doesn't trust the studies because he says scientists add things in the lab, meaning they're not just looking at the virus on its own. But scientists who do this kind of research explain they're just adding the things viruses need to reproduce so they can study them.
They'll retweet something and then they'll try to deny it afterwards and say they're only trying to look at other viewpoints.
These views are not mainstream and they're not proving hugely influential, but they feel particularly uncomfortable for scientists in South Africa, where such doubts on a much larger scale prove deadly. This is perhaps the darker threat of germ denial being whipped up today, because South Africa is a country that has faced the very real consequences of a very particular form of virus denial. In the early 2000s, its president, Thabo Mbeki, on the basis of bad information, refused to accept the link between HIV and AIDS, and to provide life-saving antiretroviral drugs, or ARVs.
All the HIV and AIDS denialism that went on in the 2000s, there was many studies that came out. It showed that this AIDS denialism may have caused over 300,000 premature deaths.
People working in HIV prevention and treatment on the ground in South Africa tell me the situation today is unrecognisable from 20 years ago, and AIDS denial is not the major problem facing them. It's a fringe issue, and even within that world, there is a range of different beliefs. Not everyone who denies HIV causes AIDS denies the existence of all viruses. And not all of the small group questioning the existence of viruses in South Africa are particularly focusing on HIV. But the quiet drumbeat of doubt from certain corners is enough to make people like Roberto prick up their ears.
The problem is, it starts off as a small movement, but these things can snowball quite quickly once they gather enough followers or believers.
Professor Noakes has not explicitly denied the link between the HIV virus and AIDS, but he has shared the work of those who do, on his Twitter feed, now X, several times without comment.
I'm here to make people think. That's my job as a scientist, and to question. And you must see both sides. So I've never said that HIV doesn't exist. But I've said people must make up their own minds. They mustn't be told what is the truth. I don't tell people not to take medications. I'm just giving them information, and they must decide what to do with it.
Even if it's incorrect information.
Well, of course.
His point is that facts agreed on by scientists have turned out to be wrong before, so we should hear from people who go against what they agree on now. But not all things have the same amount of evidence for them. It would be unusual for something with as much evidence as the link between HIV and AIDS to be completely overturned. And questioning the link has the potential to cause a lot of harm, as South Africa's recent history has shown. But Noakes insists just sharing information can't influence anyone's behaviour or do any harm, and that offering different viewpoints is just part of educating the public. But something that there's a great amount of evidence that it is wrong, for example, that HIV doesn't cause AIDS.
Well, I mean, that's your opinion. But there are other people who've got a different opinion.
And we're back where we started, in the world of blurring opinion with fact, of not just not liking ice cream, but denying it exists.
I mean, you can culture HIV, for example, within the lab. You can actually watch it jumping between infected cells. You can actually sequence the genetic material of the virus. You can also infect animals, and you can actually see them get sick.
So to watch people begin, like they did 20 years ago, to deny against all the evidence that HIV is causing AIDS, to reject the life-saving medicine to treat it, it's been both baffling and distressing to Roberto.
I don't think it's right, especially, when it's something that caused so much heartache in this country. It really boils my blood.
He's watched as people like Tim Noakes have moved from simply questioning government policies to casting doubt on the existence of HIV and of viruses in general, and broadcasting this false and confusing message to his 180,000 followers.
I think people forget that sort of time in the country, and then to see it resurfacing again, it's a terrible thing to see. And you don't want to see history repeating itself, but history seems to repeat itself quite often.
You've been listening to Extreme for BBC Trending. This episode was written and produced by me, Rachel Schreier. A huge thanks to editor Flora Carmichael and Gareth Jones for mixing this episode. If you want to get in touch about this report, then you can email me at rachel.schreier, SCHRAER, @bbc.co.uk. And remember to leave us a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts from.